All right. I'm just gonna jump in, and that was a really weird artifact with my camera there. And just say hi to you guys. Well, I'll wait a couple minutes before we really get into the meat of things. But yeah, I'm kind of excited to be talking today on Comet, and hopefully we can answer any of your guys' questions if you have any. Hopefully you guys have some, and kind of go through the ambitions of Comet, what it is, talk about the whole MVVM versus MVU, what that means, some of the benefits of MVU, and kind of just say, like, show the project off. Show this is the structure of the project, although I'm about to rewrite that for fun because I like doing that. And then go over how you can use it now, some of the known issues, because there's a few. I'm one guy building an entire UI framework. Hopefully my audio is okay. Anyone want to comment on that? I rewired my mics again. It looks like my audio is working. I got this new fancy mic, and the mixer I got didn't work for the way I wanted to set it up. So I have a brand new mixer hooked into the mix today. And actually, I can't hear myself. I like to do that so I don't yell. If not, if I can't hear myself talking, I yell. It's a bit quiet. I can fix that. So let's do this. How is that sounding? Is that better? Can you hear me now? I'm going to stop tweaking it for a second, because if I keep tweaking it, yeah, there's a delay. Anyone? Bueller? It could also be the position of me to the mic. Hopefully that is good. All right. Yeah, I turned things up, moved the mic closer. Awesome. All right. So like I said, I want to go through kind of like what is MVU versus MVVM, how things work, and all that kind of fun stuff. Okay. So to start, let's talk a little bit about the project, what it is, how it works. A lot of you are somewhat familiar with it, but I'm going to just switch to my screen, and let's jump over to the GitHub repo. Push the button again. Okay, worked that time. All right. So the URL is right there. There's a nice little bot that can help us with that as well. So that's the URL to the link. This is where the code is. Awesome. I'm glad that's sounding good. Spend a crap ton of money on a mic. You hope it sounds good. These things are not cheap. Not at all. But if I'm going to be doing this live stream thing, I might as well up my game. All right. So the README could use some love. This graphic was added by a pull request. It's pretty good. It's missing the commands thing. We don't really have commands inside of MVU, so that needs updated. But overall, it looks pretty good. So there's a couple big differences right off the bat from MVVM. With MVVM, you have a model view, view model, and all of these things. Yeah, that commands thing doesn't really exist. We don't have commands. And even bindings are a little different because you don't really set it via bindings. It's hard to explain. Maybe we can find someone who's done a documentation on it for more of the other frameworks. But yeah, interesting. So with model view, view model, you typically have your UI layer and your view models are separate, and they don't know anything about each other. Yes, they talk to each other via magic strings. Like inside your XAML, you do binding, equals this, command equals this, and you hope when it runs that those things exist on the code behind or on the view model, or things blow up. And sometimes things don't even blow up. They just don't show up. You don't get any compile time, and sometimes even no runtime validation on that. It just doesn't work. So one thing that's really nice about MVU is it simplifies that. The view and the view model are the same thing. And a lot of people are like, whoa, I want these things separated. There's a reason they're separated. Well, with MVVM, yes, there's a reason you separate these things. With traditional UI frameworks, UI testing is expensive. Writing UI tests is hard. It is. I was actually on a call about how some of that stuff worked with like Xamarin Test Cloud, which is now App Center Cloud Test something. I can't remember. Azure Test? I don't know. App Center Test, I think maybe. But there's a lot of hard things to go with UI testing, and it's slow, really slow. Whereas unit tests are typically really, really, really fast. And so if you separate your view models from your UI, you can test your view models, and from that layer down, you can run tests. You can use Visual Studio's live unit testing, which is awesome. And instantly as you're writing your code, you are notified if you break your existing tests. They run that fast. Hey, R2. With MVU, you can do that from the view down. You can do it with everything, which is really, really exciting. You should still be writing those tests, but since you're doing it in one language, one tools, one everything, you can. And you can run live unit tests via Visual Studio 2019 on Windows and actually get live unit testing as you write your Comet app. We don't have live unit testing on Mac side, but I have tests. My unit tests inside of here, if we go look in this testing library, actually instantiate UI. And they build things out, and they make sure the UI does things they're supposed to. I have views. I create my own view, and I have a data model in there, and stuff should restore to where this should not be complaining, because this does build and run. Still there. Something didn't restore. A NuGet's not restored is what that looks like to me. Come on. Let me close and restart the solution. Correct. Instantiating a Comet view is not the same as instantiating a native view. So in Comet, there's the concept of a virtual DOM, very similar like how HTML works or Blazor. When you are building your UI, you express, well, that's reloading. There's a method, and you say that the body returns something. In most cases, it's not going to be a raw view. You're going to do like a layout of some sort, like a stack. And we have two different stacks, vertical stack, horizontal stack. Well, there's actually three. There's a Z stack too. But you'd say, this is the UI that I want to represent. These views are very lightweight. You'll notice a lot of people, when they try to work on Comet and actually submit to it, I've heard so many people say, but where's all the code? Because there's not much. Intentionally, why is it complaining about my frameworks, projects? Comet is referenced, so it has Comet. Let's build clean. Rebuild of the world. I can't get my IDE to work. That's going to make this difficult. That's right. We can switch to VS Code. All this works in VS Code as well. So yes, while I'm trying to get that to rebuild so I can actually run my tests and show you how this all works, let's go to a Comet view and show you what these things are like. This is making my IDE cry. Let's go to text. Text is a very common one. It's a label if you're coming from Xamarin Forms, but a text is a text view. Yes, it has all those things called a binding, and come on. System void. What is it? I updated. Let me downgrade. I updated to a new .NET Core and a new Visual Studio via our internal previews. Let me drop down to stable really quick, and maybe that'll fix everything. This was working yesterday in a different project. I haven't tried building this in a couple days, but it should work. It always works. All right, well that goes, we're gonna drop down to stable. But you'll notice that this thing has one thing, a binding of string, which is the value. That's it. That's all we need to describe a label. And you're like, wait, what about fonts and colors and things like that? This object doesn't need to know about any of that stuff. It doesn't care. It has one job, displaying text. And a slider is a bit more complicated because it has values to, from, and through, and how it increments. So it has a couple extras. But simple things like a toggle, it has is it on or not, and an action for if it changed. Text field, one thing, text. Oh, placeholder. Sorry, placeholder. So it's very, very simple, and these views are very, very small, which makes them very lightweight. So we can instantiate and inflate these things and throw them away. That's one of the things, is very low memory impact on having these views. So we can actually diff the DOM. Like I was saying, we have a virtual DOM that shows like, this is the existing UI, everything that's in the UI. When something in the state changes, we do have this binding concept because it can do some really, really smart things. Come on. There it goes. Let's let this download everything. Good. At least now I know it's downloading. That's what I wanted to know. Yeah, that's just, I don't know what that is. That is, hopefully it'll go away as soon as I switch to, what's my build? I'm on .NET 2. I mean, I could try incrementing that to 2.1. I should. I've wanted to do that. And that may fix it, but then it's going to break all of these things that depend on it. No, I do not want to move that. Let's try incrementing all these things. That was on my to-do list at some point. We'll just try it. All right, so the idea with it is, though, is we diff the tree, or we rebuild the UI when we need to. And we don't always have to do it. It's actually very rare we have to do it. Could not restore NuGets. Project Comet this. Comet is not compatible with .NET. Now that I've done that, let's close the solution and reopen it. See if it'll restore NuGets. Comet goes away. Okay. Fighting the IDE is not how I wanted to spend my couple hours today. Not at all. It could be because I just updated the Comet tests to 3.1, and I did not update everything else. Build all. Let's see if fixing those versions did it. Oh, no, I still have a thing. Comet is not compatible with .NET Standard, but what is referencing 2.1? All right, so tests are fine. Skia is still to that one. All right, so let's update that one. And then the samples. Samples needs updated too. And I think that's all. Nope, samples is already. I got that one. Let's check. This is iOS, so it doesn't even have that. iOS. This one is also Mac, so we don't care about that one. Android. All right, this should just work. All right, so now that I've updated everything, we'll relaunch it again. And if that's not working, we'll jump to VS Code. But it should work. And we are doing the downgrade, so the downgrade might fix it as well. Although me doing a downgrade and then updating everything, that's tricky too. Okay, restore. Let's hope my restore goes this time. Once everything restores, it should be good. All right, so let's go back to what I was talking about, and stop being distracted by IDE changes. Hey, packages restored. That should make things start working. All right, so let's go to the sample really quick and look at a couple things. And we can start really simple. And one thing that's nice about this is, since we have this virtual DOM, we can always at any point rebuild the entire UI tree, diff it against the current DOM, and now know how to update the native. So you can write tests against this virtual DOM, and you should, because it doesn't need native. It can run via NUnit or XUnit. I'm using XUnit as my test runner, and things just work. I wonder if there's anything else I need to fix that. I might be Googling. All right, so we can start with a very simple thing, and if I can't run this, it's going to make it fun. But a very simple UI stack thing here is, this is a clip sample 1. It has a vertical stack. It has an image, and the image has a clip shape. Again, image doesn't know about clip shape. It doesn't need to. It has a clip shape of a circle. All right, building's going. It's going to ask if I want to install this update now to downgrade. Let's see if the build finishes first. And then the clip shape will make it to where that view is stuck to that shape. I could pass in a star. Ooh, that built. I could make that whatever I want. In this case, we have some built-in shapes. You can use a path, so you can do like a jigsaw puzzle. We have a sample of that. Or you can just say, hey, and then we also do an overlay that matches. And that overlay is going to do a little color. And let's see if I can run this before I crazy. All right, that built. Why my IDE is yelling at me, I don't know. But let's see if we can still hot reload code. All right, clip sample 1. Why? Why are you complaining? How do you not know what view is? view is you built. It's obviously there. It's coming from there. So weird. So weird. All right, so we have this. Let's go to clip sample 1. So this is what I was saying, how it has an image with a clip shape to make this a circle. And if we comment that out, and let's actually bring this over so you can see both at the same time, we can recompile and just run that body method again, and it knows how to diff the DOM. So it makes hot reload just work because it's always got this concept of, depending on what happens, just rebuild the UI, diff the DOM, display it, which makes hot reload just implicitly work. And you can just toy with it and it's instant. Why in the world would you ever want a 44 pixel border? I don't know, but you could. And my favorite is always go to, I can't spell fuchsia. Did I spell that right? No, I can't spell fuchsia. Dang it. No code completion. I need to just do that update so that way my stuff will all start working. But even though my IDE is not working and I don't have IntelliSense, yeah, I can try killing the bin objects folder. That makes sense. Let's try that. Let's close this. Let's first. Yes, I could copy and paste. Yes, there's the H. I did not have the H in there, did I? So, fun fact, some of you may know, Fuchsia was originally spelled completely wrong inside of Xamarin Forms. You'll never guess who did that. All right, so we probably only need to kill a few of these. Let's move this one. I'm still going to run that update too. And I should, John Dick has that extension that will just do that for you, blow away your bin object folders. I can't remember what he calls it. Reddit, that's his handle he uses everywhere. Xamarin. Is it this one? Does Mott's talk? I know John Dick did one. Oh no, he's just telling you an easy way of doing that. I know John had an extension. Sure, mrefactor I think can do it too. I don't have mrefactor installed. All right, so did I run that update? Check for updates. Should say they're all downloaded. All right, well, that is going again. We'll look back at the docs to talk about some of these things. So with this body, I can at any point reevaluate that, which makes hot reload work beautifully. There's a couple other things that are really nice. Hey, Garrett, thanks for the raid. Wow, 15 of you guys coming in. So we are in the process of doing an intro to Comet and explaining what Comet is and how it's different than like an MVVM style framework because it's MVU, Model View Update. And this is a new UI new UI paradigm that's been taking that's getting a lot of traction lately. And this is a new UI framework that I've been building to do this in C#. Because right now there's no real way to do this in C#. All right, let's see if my IDE, let's install those updates, and we'll keep talking via README while my updates install. 1 second. That in there. All right, so that's going to go. So a couple things that are really interesting is there's a, Fable, Elmish. Elmish was the first. They're the ones who started all this, I believe. And there's been a lot of other frameworks that have cropped up over the years because of that. And this is one of them. Heavily inspired by that. Swift UI works that way. There's a lot of these frameworks. Flutter works this way. So it's really fun. And you can actually write a lot less code to do your UI. And we'll start talking about some of these things. So, Fabulous does it for Xamarin Forms as well. Exactly right. Xamarin Forms, but it's in F#. And F# hurts my brain. I can do it if I really sit down and do it, but I wish I could. I wish I was better at F#. But C# is still my favorite. So I wanted to have all this yummy goodness in C#. So I've introduced a couple things. I'm not Frank. I wish I was. Frank is brilliant. So I've added a couple new things into here. And right now this is a little clunky. And I'm going to make this better. It will get better. But for now, I gave you an object just to make this easy so you don't have to think about it. in order to know when to rebuild that body, I need to know what objects and what properties were used to build the UI and at what point inside that method they were used. So if we're looking at, do we have any examples in here that have state? This has state. So with this one, we have click count, right? With a state and it's set as 1. To be honest, this syntax is even easier. You can just say equals 1. You don't even need to do this new state nonsense. You can say click count equals 1. Now, inside this build method, we have this helper class called state for basic data types like integer. How do you know when an integer was used or changed? You can't. It's just not possible. So there's this helper class called state. Well, eventually we can do some runtime changes. And if we do that, and language changes, we might be able to make this work without state. But the goal with Comet was to make it work without changing the language and without changing the runtime. So the state, what it does is it wraps iNotify property read or changed, and I have a new interface called iNotify property read. It's just like property changed, except it calls during the get, not just during the set. So we have both, one for get, one for set. And that lets me know how these things were used. So I know for using the text to build the text value, click count was used. And button is going to change click count. So whenever click count changes, I know I only need to update the text value. I don't need to build that entire body. I can do magic data binding for you and just say, hey, we'll just change the text value. We'll reevaluate just that, which works really nice. And as I mentioned, there's the state there for your simple data types. And for your more complex ones, so you don't have to implement iNotify property changed and iNotify property read. I give you a binding object that does it for you. When you call get property and set property, it just calls out those notifications for you. Eventually, though, I want to do something nice with some IL generation. So you'll just add an interface to iNotify property change. Maybe you'll add an assembly on there or an attribute. And when you have that attribute, it'll just generate everything else. Yes, I've used Foddy, and I'm probably thinking of doing it with and without Foddy. Some people like it, some don't. So I want to have a Foddy weaver that'll do it. And I don't know if I'm saying that right. Foodie, Foddy, I've heard it. Somebody Foddy though, whatever. So yes, I want to have it so it works with or without that. If you have Foddy, then it'll use one of its weavers. If not, it will do one that works without it, just so I don't force a dependency on people. But yes, it has to play nicely with that as well. So absolutely. So it'll do that. Just haven't got around to writing that stuff yet. It takes time, and I'm one man. So I'll get there. I will get there. But for now, this is really easy to say binding object, do the get sets, and it'll take care of all of that magic for you. Eventually, like I said, you won't have to do that. And if you don't want to do this, you can just add the interface. Yeah, I just don't want to force the dependency. But I mean, those who do, I want it to work cleanly and nicely with it. So we will get a weaver for it. I'm just not there yet. But all you have to do is do this. This little thing here, Foddy. I don't know. All right. So this little thing though, all it is it does subclass iNotify property changed. Hey, IDE installs are done. And it just has property read. And when we start looking at some more complex samples, you'll see how this is used, and I'll explain kind of how that works. Yeah, I'm no expert. I can barely speak English, so Bodhi, I can do that. I mean, yeah, I just think with the EY making the E sound, is that E already used? So it would be not a long O? I don't know. I'm the worst at grammar in English. My wife makes fun of me for it all the time. All right, let me remove my window. Come on. Oh, wait. Yes, it fixed. It worked. Downgrading. So exciting. We now have everything up and working. All right, so let's look at a tad bit more complex sample. Since we looked at how this thing works with the image and the clip shape, run that. If we look at this binding sample, which is a horrible example of a binding sample, I just wanted to do something truly insane and make sure it worked. So this view has a class in here called myBindingObject. So original, with a can edit and text. So state and binding object, state is just there. This state of t is clearly just a nice little wrapper for you to make it easy. So you get an iNotify property read and changed off an integer. And same thing here and then this state is saying I'm going to use this object as a state object as well. I may need to change these names so they're not the same. I'm not against changing it to state object. In the end, this object shouldn't exist anyway once I get the weavers. It's just a convenience method for now. And maybe it won't go away, but it's not needed. But it is still a binding. I get what you're saying with a state object. It still is a binding. And bindings are not exclusive to MVVM. They're not. So I do use bindings in here. I do directly bind. You don't have to explicitly map them. You'll notice nowhere in here am I saying new binding. I don't have to. If I use an object that implements iNotify property read and I mark it as a state, then you'll get magic data binding. All right. Yeah, no problem. See you later, Garrett. So inside of here, this is very complicated code. It gets really ugly. But what I wanted to do with this one was to show some ugliness. So I did. So state.canEdit. In this case, we're saying if we can edit, then give us a text field, an entry. If not, give us a label. Now, since state can edit was used outside of an individual control construction, it knows whenever can edit is toggled, that layout's broken right now, to rebuild the entire UI. There's a couple layout bugs that we've been working on, rewriting the layout, so I have a couple layout bugs inside my sample that I really need to fix. Like I said, this is a proof of concept. It's early stages, so there are bugs. There are issues. I will not claim that is perfect. But the idea is I know I need to reevaluate this entire thing and swap it out. Whereas if I just, oh, come on. I need to fix that. If I just update the text, it doesn't rebuild because it knows how to data bind that. And yeah, something's broken on that. Whoa, did I click I must have clicked the font size. I did, I was clicking the font size. The font size stuff does globally. You'll notice I'm setting the global font size, so it screws up the whole app when you do that. And I did not add a way to reset it. Joys of playing with sample code. But inside of here, I can easily say that this toggle is tied to canEdit. So when the toggle changes, I can do this whole thing, so I can set it myself, or I can just do state.canEdit. And now it knows how to handle that perfectly on its own, which is really, really exciting. And aside from looking at that ugly code, one of the things that I was really talking about is the benefit is I can write a test library directly against Comet.Samples, and I can test these UI objects. I can test that it interacts with my data objects the way I'm expecting it to. I need to fix those spaces because that's bothering me. There. Need to commit that. But I'm easily able to just keep track of how things work and to make sure that my tests work on real UI. If we look in my test project, I have quite a few tests against actual UI, making sure that the data binding works. I have lots of data binding tests for like making sure that when I'm using the state does things properly. And even as far as how many times, you'll notice I'm keeping track of how many times this body is called. And so I will update values and make sure that binding works, and then I'm not rebuilding this whole tree and diffing the entire DOM if I don't have to. So there's lots of really cool benefits to being able to test your UI code directly. And you can write unlimited tests against these. If I run this thing, they run really fast. Broken test. View test. What is broken? Oh, it's still building. So that's using old test results. Once it hasn't even started running the test, it's like, wow, that's fast. All right, let's see. After the solution builds, it wants to build the entire solution. And I did just go clean everything. So it's got to rebuild the world. Give it a second, and the tests minus build are really, really fast. And I run them every commit. See how fast those tests ran? That was quick. Let's do it again. That's like 3 seconds, maybe 5. Oh, why is it building again? Okay, that's like under a second for the test to run, minus that weird Mac build. I don't know why it's running that. If I right click here and run tests, it should still building the. I don't know why that's happening. But these tests run really, really, really fast against my UI, and make sure that like all of my binding tests show test source. I have lots in here to where I build out the UI and I make sure that values match what come in and what come out, which makes my life really, really, really nice to be able to do that for tests. And then I even have like a little test base to reset everything in between. So like the entire state of the entire app. Typically you wouldn't want that, but in tests you do. So some funny things in there. All right. So far, MVU has the nice benefit of I can write tests directly against my UI, so I don't need to separate them the same way. Hey, Jack, how's it going? Yeah, so I don't have that same desire to separate my code from my UI. Now, eventually, you do run into the problem of like most of these samples look great. I mean, looking at the clip sample, beautiful. Few lines of code, nothing to it. Even looking at some of my list samples, again, that's really, really small. There's not much to, oh, that's the details. But these, it's nice, it's concise. That's my entire UI code. This is just me newing up a thing when really you'd get that from the database. But there's very little code. One thing about these there are these extension methods that get set everywhere. And everything is done for like modifying the views is via extension methods. Because I mentioned a view itself has very little properties. Text has one property, just one. And so font size, things like that, all get done via extension methods. And eventually, though, you are going to start getting into some crazy looking codes. Do you always apply updates directly to state from the view, or do you let the handler or something else change this? So no, you don't have to do it yourself. You can. Now, it depends on what you're updating. So if we were to do, there's a Ride the Comet. Where is Ride the Comet? Ride the Comet. Great little small one. What it does is it has a text and it has an integer. Oh, this isn't the one I was thinking of. Comet.rides, and it increments the rides. With that, I'm doing some logic. A button doesn't know what to do. But with this binding sample, again, really ugly code, you'll notice I say new toggle state.canEdit. I just pass the Boolean in and the UI is going to take care of it. Now, if I want to take care of it, I can get, well, I'm trying to think, this is on. I can deal with it myself. So that way I can do really complex things and make it trigger two different things or whatever. So I can set the state, I can then invalidate something else. I have that, but if I'm fine and happy with only just changing that one Boolean and everything else works, I'm good. So this will update that value when that toggle changes. I don't have to do anything. Really nice. But like I said, you can opt in and do it. With a button click though, what's a button gonna do? What's it tied to? With a text field, you'll notice that this text field doesn't actually set the value. Oh no, this one does, on commit. It doesn't need that. That works too. Or even simpler, that works. So I don't have to deal with it. You'll notice that all of these, you can pass the value in directly, or you can do this lambda style. There's a reason for having both. If you're doing a direct binding, just pass it straight in. If you want to format that text, do this. The reason is, if you have this function, I can recall this function so that way it formats the value. If you pass a formatted value into here, so if I was to do this, whenever state.text changes, I can't data bind that text field. I have to rebuild this entire UI, diff the DOM, and apply. Because I know text was used for this value, but I don't know how to generate this extra string. I just can't. It's not possible. So having both allows you to do complicated things or you can just do the simple, just use this value, two-way bind it, whatever. So that's really nice. And also with the lambda thing, if you did a lambda here, you'd need to then do a lambda to set it, because I don't know how to set that thing back. How could I? So you have the power to do either or. But if I just want to do straight bind this to state.text, it's a one-to-one mapping and that'll work. So now when the field changes, the label will change and everything else will. And also it will warn you, it will debug.writeLine like crazy. If you do something like this, eventually I want to add a little pop-up inside the UI when you're in debug mode saying, hey, please don't do this. Turn this into a function for performance reasons. So eventually I will yell at you like properly with like a pop down inside of the app, only in debug mode. I don't want to mess with people in release mode because how are they going to fix that? And yes, we can do some analyzers. Absolutely. We can do some analyzers so you can get it at build time as well. But yes, there's some things that we should do. If you're passing the value in straight, just pass it in. If you're doing anything to fiddle with it, do functions. And that makes this really, really, really powerful. Now, there's a couple really interesting things with, as I was showing off on that other page, with how we do, not that one, this one, how everything is set via these functions. I mean, these extensions. So vertical stack has a font size set to it. Vertical font doesn't actually use fonts. Yeah, maybe we just use that as well. I agree. Is there any plans on an official team for Comet? Right now, it is purely a prototype. There's nothing saying this is going to happen. I would love for that to happen in the future. So the more noise people make about it and wanting actual support for it. Right now, it's a lot of work for me to do it all myself. So I'm in the process of looking how I can reuse Xamarin Forms, their renderers, not the Xamarin Forms layer, but just the renderers. Because if I could use their renderers, that would make this way faster. And I probably could handle most of it myself. So I'm looking to how to reuse some of the work from another team. And eventually we may be able to get traction and get people to use this. It's kind of going the same route as Blazor did. Blazor wasn't anything official for a while, and eventually it became something. So hopefully we can do that here. So the beautiful thing about using these extensions for setting these extra properties, font size, that's all styling, right? So we can tell the vertical stack, everything that needs a font inside of it, use this font size of 12. That also is great for memory. All three of those texts inside of there aren't going to take up the memory footprint of having a font size set to it. And you think about everything else that goes along with styling as well. It's using a lot less memory. And because of that. And we can do things like style ID as well. Instead of doing these, I can do like .style as body, header, whatever. And all of those will automatically just work. And since I set the font size of 12 on this vertical stack, all of its children will get that font size of 12, except this one because it override and said, hey, I want 17. And as I mentioned with that style as like heading 1, all that's doing is setting a style ID. All of these views have a style ID, and it's just nicely setting it up for you. So you can easily just do style IDs, add your own. There's a .set style ID, I thought. Style ID. Yeah, you can just do style ID foo, and now it'll use foo for its style ID. Granted, I haven't set up foo, so it's not going to do anything. But you can add your own. And it makes it super easy to style your entire app and change the styling. If I run this sample again, let's jump into this list view, which this one is list view sample 1, right? It's, super easy. Click on one, we go to the details. The details page is really ugly because I just haven't spent the time. But let's do style, heading. Oh, no, that's an image. Image does not have style as, and the hot reload freaked out because I broke something. I'm working on making the hot reload more resilient, so if it can't hot reload, it doesn't stop debugging. It'll just be like, don't. Most of the time it's pretty good, but there's some issues every once in a while. So style as heading 1. Oh, I'm not even there. Let's go into that. List sample 1. Curse that. I have something, I can show you what's broken there. Because I'm not passing that thing in right, technically to hot reload this, I need to do something special until I get to IL generation. There's a better way of passing these around. We can pass them around via the environment. If we do that, I don't need this in the constructor, and I can hot reload this without doing anything fancy. So on this, instead of doing that, dot set environment song. There. Now that will work. Yeah, that one didn't do the same thing. Okay, just making sure how that one worked. That will now work, and that takes me to another concept of environment. So with environment, we can tell it to get, I need this song object, and I need to get it from somewhere. I don't care where it comes from. And in this case, the details is going to tell that page, here you go, here's what you need. Or the list view is going to pass that in saying, hey, here's this song. So now when I click into this, I can hot reload this page without it blowing up on me. Hey, that's heading 1, which is way too big. Let's go to list view details, and we're like, we don't want that. Style as heading 3. How's that gonna look? That looks better, a lot better. And now this song is just getting a song from the environment. It really doesn't care where this thing comes from. Oh, that line is invalid. It's stupid to have that now. And it just works because it got it from somewhere. And I've been working on doing a Gmusic sample where I use the database, and I just have an environment thing there saying, get me my database. And when I'm doing that, I can actually hot reload my database and change my database logic, because whenever something changes that's registered from the environment, it will update everything that has a reference to it. So it doesn't have to know whether it has the latest and greatest of everything, because it's guaranteed to. And so you can have things that are global or just scoped to this view. And that's kind of how the styling stuff works. It works along those same lines. Now let's go back and look a little bit more into that styling thing. So if I go to material design, I have all these little buttons, and I can just say material button, and that's really ugly. These are the ugliest samples because I have not finished them. But the idea is all of these are using the same exact view regardless of which color you pick, and it magically figures it out based on what the color that gets passed into it. And inside of how that works is if we go to the material sample, so we have the picker. The material style picker says, hey, here's all the color palettes. Now it just says material style, apply, new material style, and passes in a color palette. These color palettes are defined by Google with the material design IO. If I switch this to be Skiadrawn renders, they actually look a lot better because I spent a lot of time making those look really good. And all we're saying is on this view and this view only, apply the style. You'll notice how the header changes. The navbar actually changes when I go back because it's only applied on that view and its children. So if I navigate from here, all of its children are going to have that green design or purple. And off it goes, which is really, really fun. And at that point, this material sample, all it has is it has material styles, has some additional things. Style as the contained button, style as outlined, style as text. Actually, let's drop down to the Skia renders because I want to show you how much cooler they look anyway. Go to iOS, app delegate, Skia controls. So this is going to tell it to replace every control that it can with a Skia drawn control. I don't have that many of them. So how do I navigate to a different view from a state? I'm not sure I understand. I don't know why you would go from a view. Like states don't need to navigate views. Like the states don't know anything about a view. It's just your states aren't view models. States are data objects. Data objects. So with MVVM, you have your views and your view models and your models, right? You have all these different layers. MVU has 2 layers. You have your models. Probably you're going to have more layers. You'll have your data object, your data access layer, all of those type of things, but that's separate. For the UI, as far as it's concerned, you're going to have your objects, your state, and you're going to have the view. That's it. So all the navigation should happen from that view layer because it knows about the UI. Like in the case of a music player app, songs know nothing about UI, nor should they. How could they navigate? They don't. The view layer does all the navigation. All right, so now if I go back into that material, you'll notice these buttons actually look better and they're fancier and they're animate. Yeah, these buttons are cool. And these are Skia drawn buttons. Now I can opt in. Right now I told it to do everything as Skia, but I can choose just to do certain controls as Skia, not everything, which is fun. And inside that sample, I make sure that I expose all the Skia controls so you can choose to use them directly rather than swapping everything out, because you may only want a single of my Skia controls. Like my text box and my text field is not as good as Apple's. Not yet. It'll get there, but it's not yet. So I can actually say, hey, let's do Skia controls, and notice they're the same things, same exact API, prefixed with SK. And so these are the Skia ones. And you get all this fanciness that are Skia drawn. Really, really simple. And like I said, the API is identical. If I didn't have the Skia ones, it could still like if Skia didn't work on a specific platform, it would just fall back and use the native stuff anyway. But it gives you the option there. So yeah, how about on platform, on idiom? Perfect. I'm glad you asked that. This is something that I've been looking close into lately and how I want this to work. Let me see if this projects. I was prototyping some of that because that's a great example. So right now, you'll notice that I have one project called Comet.Samples, and that's how it's going to be. Eventually, this is going to be a multi-target .NET sample. So a lot of the things that you do on platform and on idiom are styles. That's the main place I do it. You don't normally swap out what the views are going to be or things like that. And so using the styles will take care of that, because font sizes. You want a different font size on iOS than you do on Android, or colors. So a lot of those you're just going to take care of via those extensions or however those work. So right now, I would do most of that via styles. If you want to do anything more complex, as I said, I was prototyping some of this and how this will work. I have this render test. See if it's good enough to show. I don't know. It might work, might not. But it shows the architecture I was going for. So for things like renderers, I was toying with this and how this would work. Eventually, this project will automatically swap out this .ios, .android, and will actually execute completely different code and gives you 100% native access to the native UI bits in one library. Which, doing this type of thing should allow us to also inline. If I truly wanted, I can say if iOS, and right now it's on the .NET Standard one, I'll switch it to iOS. I get all these additional options. And I can do that right in line. I can also, if I switch to Android, this will switch out and it gives me different options. If, and it'll even tell me the ones that it knows about. So I think that long term, we're going to go more this style to where you can just inline if-def. It's actually a lot faster and more performant because it's compiled in compared to the current on-platform stuff in forms, and will also enable you to have this .android, .ios. So you can have, in this case, we'll throw one here that is like public void do something cool. Right, so this thing can get called from somewhere else. And now what I can do is this can directly call, hey, I can do it. All right, now I can go into iOS and implement void, hey, I can do. Is that how I spelled it? I can't remember how I spelled it. I should have copied and pasted. Oops. And now, hey, I can do it. Actually, I'll just use that execute because that actually exists everywhere. And now this is called from the platform specific. And now in each platform, I say execute. And now each platform is going to call a different execute. and do something very different. So it allows you in one project to, if you, right now I'm toying with just doing it off this naming convention, or maybe we'll put something in like the build actions where you can specify a target. But right now, if you do the target.android or .ios.standard, it automatically just swaps those in and out, which works pretty good. So that way I like this having separate files. So all the common stuff is here. The separate things are in these individual ones, which should be very little code. The bulk of it will be in there. Or right inline, you can do if defs, which is super, super exciting. At least I find that really exciting. So eventually this should work beautifully in everything. Does that answer your question, Dan? But for simple things like style, make your style slightly different, or do things with state. So right now I have like, I can do this I can do that style ID. And I can say foo. Now I can now say, when I'm creating my app at the very beginning, and I'm still working on like what the app model would be, the end goal would be you never have to have these project heads. You should not have the sample.ios.android. You should have one .NET Comet.samples, and I just say .NET run Comet.samples iOS, and it would do everything for me. So I wouldn't even need this project head. That's my end goal. Am I there yet? Nope. But I'll get there. So I can just do Comet.view.set global environment. And I can do this right here, to where this has some really, I need to add another one. I have it internal, but it's not public yet. All right, let's go add that while I'm thinking at it. So I have these things where I can say style ID, and then I also have type and style ID. That's what's missing. Thought I had these. Typed key. Yeah. Well, I will add some of those in here. So right now you can say, hey, so for, let's just say style ID, which I think we called it foo. I can say the key, and all the key data is all inside of environment keys. So I can say environment key dot text dot, or did I do it under fonts? It's under fonts. Fonts dot size is 30. Now that class, any class that has a style ID of foo will have that. And eventually I'm going to throw the type in there. I thought I had this where you could do style ID type. So it'll say anything that is foo and has the type of text or the type of button, its font size is this. So all the styling stuff just works. I can't believe I'm missing that overload, which is kind of sad. I need to add that one in. I do it internally because if we look at my styles, you can see styles. I've been building out like this material style, which does really fancy things. So it does like the different type of style, button styles, and it goes through and actually sets them. It's really easy to build these style classes because you can just say, hey, button style, and I can say, this is how I set my heading one. Style ID, name of heading one, and it has a font attributes of size 96, weight light. And these things, these styles actually are control state aware. So you can set them by default. That's the default. I can also say for buttons, I think we change the buttons will show them changing in material style. So inside of here, I say the background for control state default is this color. Hovered is this color. Pressed is this color. Now on a mobile, you're not going to get hovered. Hover doesn't exist on mobile, but it does on desktops. And so when you hover over, the color changes. And when you click, the color changes again. And I don't really have to do much aside from just say, this is what goes into here. And then the style applies everything magically for you. And all it's doing is setting the environment for these views. Here's the style ID. Set those values to equal this, which is really, really, really cool. All right, that was a lot. Any other questions? Well, I deep dived into how style works. And Dan, you never answered. Did that answer your question? Was that all you wanted to know about on-platform / on-idiom stuff? Calling Dan. All right. What are the biggest missing pieces right now? Right now, platform-specific code and the layout needs the most work. So iOS is the farthest along. It's just where I'm at right now. Is iOS works better than Android, which works better than Mac, and right now I'm running the iOS or the Mac solution. This supports UWP, WPF, Blazor. It can pretty much go anywhere, but there's a lot of pieces that are missing in those spaces right now. There's just a lot I need to do. So if someone was going to contribute, I would spend some time looking at these platforms, and hopefully this week I'm going to restructure this to follow that other pattern I was just showing you, to where it'll just be one Comet and it'll have the handlers in there and it'll have iOS.android, whatever like that. So it'll be one project, but I'm going to get those done anyway. But even from the community contributions, iOS has gotten more community contributions than Android. But you'll notice Android has less of these than iOS does. Just does. I think like the fancy clip shape stuff doesn't work yet on Android. Just little things like that. So iOS is farther along. Yeah, Android, and it should hot reload. So if you were going to jump in and start playing with this, and you want the hot reload, if you're using VS Code, there's an extension inside the marketplace called Comet, or Clancy.comet, or Comet Debug. This guy, yay! Comment.clancy.debug. And if you install this, it crashes the ID every 30 seconds. Sorry, I need to spend some time on that. Yes, end goal would be I want Skia. You should be able to choose between Skia and native. I don't want to just say only Skia, only native. That's a mistake. I think that you should be able to choose at the control level or at the app level. Do I want Skia or do I want native? And do it all. So yes. And I have some Skia controls. I've been working on them lately. Right now, the Skia controls, I have a button, I have text, I have progress bar, I have slider, and I have a text field and a toggle. Now those are the individual controls. This is actually the code that draws it. So this is how it draws. The one thing that's really cool about how I've architected this, we haven't talked about the platform-specific stuff, but Skia has platform-specific as well, and you can override drawing just a single layer. So if you don't like the way I draw something, you can draw like on the progress bar or the slider, you can override and draw just the thumb and say, I want to draw my own thumb, or you draw your thumb and then I'm going to draw on top of your thumb. You can do that. Really, really, really easy. And since Comet is super lightweight and these views don't have a lot of properties, there's probably over time going to be some things that you want that I don't support yet. And it's really easy to extend those and hopefully eventually bring any extensions people do add, bring them into the common library. So inside of this, like I said, everything's just an extension. We have where's the font stuff? I thought it was in that. That's exceptions. Is it in helpers? Yeah, need to rename that folder. So there's like font extensions. This is how all the font stuff works. Everything just says, hey, set these environment variables, and off it goes. And then on the platform specific side, it's again super, super easy. The text handler just says, hey, go get me the color. Go get me the font, and it sets those properties. Now, if you want to extend Comet without subclassing renderers or without even dealing with renderers, you can do that. I can add my own things, my own properties. So inside my own little sample, I can just go to, hey, sample, binding sample. Oh, that one's just so horrible. Let's go to something better. So let's go to like this list details. I can be like dot set environment, hey guys. And so, hey guys, I can give it a null value. I can say 1, it doesn't matter. I can pass something in and pass a value into it. That's the key thing. So now I'm going to be told, hey guys, on this text when I go there. And I should have chose one that wasn't so far in, but oh well, we'll deal with that. So now inside of the sample.ios, Or once I have the app model stuff, I can go in here and say, that was text handler. Go into my text handler and say mapper. Hey mapper, tell me when hey guys fires. Handler view. And that view is actually going to be a text, because I'm doing this in a text handler. So now text handler, whenever it runs into a label that has that property set on it, is this a bus type system? I'm not sure I know what that means. All right, so whenever that thing happens, it's going to say, here's the handler, and I can say handler.native view. And this native view is a UI label. As UI label, I now have access to the text to say, hey, what's your text property? Or I can say .get color, get clip shape, but I can do get environment, and I can say, hey guys, and it's going to pass back that 1. And now whenever that environment changes, so if someone says set environment again, or you tweak something, and these things can cascade through. So I'm setting it on that specific view, but I can set that at the app level and say, hey, app, set this for everybody. Everybody has this variable to them. So anyone who says get environment, hey guys, they're going to get my default value unless I overrode it. So that works really nicely in here. So I did not have to know much about how the renderers work. I know nothing about how that native works under the hood. All I have to say is when hey guys is set, tell me. I'm going to grab that native label, and then I'm going to say label.text equals, let's do some string formatting. We can say foo, so it puts that 1 or 0 in there. And then text dot value dot get current value. And that's going to get the current value from the bindings. And that's it. That's all I need to know. And I could have just done that, and it would have figured itself out. It auto casts it nicely. But .current value is the right way. And now I've just overrode the way a native view works on iOS without subclassing, without putting attributes anywhere. All I said is, hey, all the text handlers, I'm right here. Let me know when something happens, and I'm going to take that over. And we can put a breakpoint here. And this is only going to fire when we get into that list details. And now the artist is going to look really funny because it's going to have 1 : whatever. And so let's go. That was in list sample 1. And then we tap on 1. Curse it. Did I go to the wrong one? Thought that was right. That environment, hey guys, delegate, that's the same one. Yeah, that's the same. That should have worked. Text. Of course, it doesn't work in my demo. I am using the right one. Yeah, okay, I'm using the right one. This has worked every other time. I don't know what I did wrong. I did something wrong. Maybe it's something I need debugging. But that's the grand idea is you would just say, hey, text handler, when that thing changes, tell me. I don't know why that didn't work. Very, very odd. Yes, with great power comes great responsibility. The idea is you wouldn't want to do everything via magic strings like this. You want to do an extension method. So just like we add extension methods, you would add your own set of extension methods. And hopefully ones that are popular, we can just move directly into the library. But I see people doing these things, doing a few of these because they're awesome and usable. Weird. That's setting that environment. This has legit, I just rewrote the property mapper, and I wonder if I messed it up when I rewrote it. I was rewriting it, so right now you're doing it globally, but I want to enable you to right here in line, just do text, something like this. This code does not work. Mapper, and you could say equals like this. Hey guys, handler HView, something like this. Very, again, invalid code. None of that exists yet, but that's what I was working towards, was allowing that. Actually, no, that was right. This one goes to that one. I don't know why it's freaking out. It doesn't know what to do with that thing. But in the end, that's something that'd be pretty cool. So then you could just do like if iOS, and then you'd be like h.nativeview as UI label, and off you go. So right in line, you can do really cool things like that. And it's probably with my rewrite of the property mapper. I just added tests, so I thought I fixed it. I had property mapper fixes before, or tests before I rewrote it. And yeah, because we have tests to make sure that that thing works. So I'm wondering what I broke in there. But yeah, and it makes sure that you can override things and pass things in and da-da-da-da-da, all that fun things. Oh, I know why. I know why. No, UI inits first. If I do this before I call init, or initialize, before I initialize, it will mess that up. But doing that where I did it should have done it. I don't know. Something for me to dig into. But the architecture of these handlers are that each of them have this mapper here that say, here's the property, and then here is a static function that deals with it. And so you can call that base function from inside of yours app delegate. You can say app-delegate.map property value and pass the two things in. And it's all typed nicely. And then at that point, you just say, hey, give me the native view, set it. And that's all we're doing here, is just setting it on each of them. And so each property does that. And so you can choose to override any of those. For kicks, let's undo all this. I wonder what's up with that. Hey guys, I might have messed something up on that. Something I'm going to dig into, but let's forget hey guys right now and let's leave this how it is and say, let's override environment, or no, name of text value. So now all of these, and you can also set a default value into this thing. So we could 1. All right, so if that's null, it's going to give us 1. But now every label, this should work. And also, like, the hot reloading works on those handlers. So when you're writing these handlers, you can actually hot reload them, which is really nice to be able to hot reload them. All right, so that was under, actually this should have been called, because all of these are doing that. Oh, guys, I wasn't using those handlers. I'm an idiot. I told Skia all of those labels were Skia drawn. All of those labels were Skia drawn. And Skia does its own handlers. It handles things on its own. Oh, wrong one. This one. All right. Sorry. I shot myself in the foot with my own demo. I forgot we enabled Skia. Now it's fine. So is Comet suitable for large, complex desktop software? Yes. Well, once it's finished and once it's in a better state. So one of the things that is nice is a lot of these controls are really small. I mean, a lot of these views are really small and very concise. And it's got one thing and it does it really nice. This one does a clip shape of putting a highway shield over an image. But eventually, you're going to start writing some ugly views. This is a lot harder to follow than XAML. Let's be honest. When it starts getting this big, it's hard. Let me show you what this thing looks like. And this is something that we need to add tools to help you actually, and I just messed up every single one of our labels. Now that it injects perfectly fine when you use the right mappers because text handler wasn't actually being used. All right, so let's go to our credit card demo, which now everything has that one injected into it. All the labels do, which is pretty cool that I can do that. I don't want to do that. Let's actually remove that. All right. The app delegate doesn't hot reload. Just things inside the Comet library do. All right, so like I said, when you're writing your own stuff, I hot reload my database inside of gmusic. Let's go back into that credit card. I'm sorry, sample. This is a very freaking complicated screen. All of this is done via shapes, all in one view. Don't do that. Don't do that. This should be separated out into user controls. And this is where eventually we need some tools. We need to be able to say, hey, this is that vertical stack that is this credit card thing, right? From here to here. I need to right click and say refactor to new view. And then it'll take all of this and it'll set it up into a new control. And we'll call that the credit card because that's the actual credit card that does all that. It does not need to work this way. It just doesn't. And so we need some tools. And right now we did that with this bordered entry. We wanted this little fancy entry thing there with what icon goes there. That is separated out into its own little control. Now that bordered entry is kind of nice and clean. It is. And so we need to do that. And we need to have some tools to make it easy for you to say right click, extract this thing out to a new view, and then you don't run into any of these giant things. And there's a lot of efficiencies that Comet has that can handle that will make it a bit more memory efficient and faster than say forms. So yes, I see no reason you couldn't do this for a large complex application, but it's going to need some tooling because eventually this thing gets a little bit unruly. But if I was to be able to just right click and say, move this to its own class, give it a name. So now that's a view that can be reused. Do the same thing when we were writing that border to control. It would have been nice to just say right click, shove this off into its own class. But having some of those refactoring tools are going to be needed. Yes, eventually I want to have that happen. I did a stream where I talked about that, like how to add some of the parameter like stuff for Blazor. And I was showing off some pseudocode of what I think it should look like. Is it there yet? No. And it kind of is already to an extent. Notice that environment stuff that I just did for passing this around, but it doesn't have a nice wrapper to where you specify this requires this, it can navigate. But you'll notice that I'm passing data from the child, to the child. It's getting this song in from the environment. And right here, I just say set environment songs that. And it will be, I actually should add something that says like that parameter or something. And maybe we can do something nice tooling wise that would let it like, oh, I'm doing it on this. What are the parameters on here? So it would say, hey, there's a song, right? Because it knows I want a song from the environment. So maybe eventually we can do some nice tooling things. So that way it'll be like, give me some IntelliSense here. I'm pretty sure you want to set the song and you'll pass that thing in. And even force type safety. So eventually it'll be nice, but that is doing it, what it would do under the hood. So yes. Yes, eventually there's no reason why you couldn't write your own controls that can be used. Any libraries work that way. So you could add your own set of extensions to say, here's how you add a gradient background to any view. And you just have the extensions that are in there, you tie into the native handlers and off it goes. So yes, absolutely you could do something like that. And you can tie things down to the view level every single view in here, or handler in here, eventually maps down. Let me go back to those handlers. One thing that's really fancy about those handlers is, it's in platforms. All of these handlers call down to a root one at some point. So I think that even the Skia one does that. I really think it does. So if I go to like the radio button handler, the radio button does not. I didn't write this one. I should have asked him to do that in the pull request. So this actually needs change to do view handler dot mapper. So this chains it and now says any of the stuff in here. So that's how background color will work. Background color, all the things that are used on every view, background color, border, shader, or shadow, clip view, overlay, those are global. Anything in this that's here, as long as one of the other ones, like a button handler says, I'm going to deal with my own border, it can do that. Environment keys dot views dot border. So it can say, I'm doing my own border, right? And it can do that. So now buttons override and don't do its own thing. And so these things are chainable infinitely. So each people, you can add your own things in here. So you can say, hey, I've got my own mapper that will tie to my own button type. So people can then ship those for control vendors, and they still get all the benefits of using all the underlying ones. You can still inject in and use theirs the same way. The one thing is the Skia handlers don't use like text handler because they need to do very different things. How they handle text is different. Skia is its own platform, just like this one is the iOS specific one. It does things differently. So that's why I ran into that issue. But yes, eventually once Comet stabilizes and we get to a better state, it would be awesome to have people shipping libraries for it. All right. Any other questions? You guys are getting some good ones. Delete that so I don't accidentally commit that. Actually, I'm going to, so the radio button was one that was just submitted recently. And then also, what's the other one? I'm trying to remember the name of it. There was one I just approved. Oh, I was about to approve. Never mind, it's not approved yet. It needs something else in it. But all of these handlers under the hood map down to the view handler or whatever one it should subclass. So if you override it at the view handler.mapper level, you've got like global. You're in at the global level, which is pretty cool. And it also makes it's another way that we're able to share so much code because like border, background color, clip shape, all of those are handled once for every single control as long as they tell the mapper to use them. And you don't have to subclass our controls to use their mapper. You just say, my new mapper, give me theirs too. So you don't have to subclass everything, which is really, really awesome. Okay. If there's no other questions there, let's maybe talk about if someone wanted to, how do I limit the scope of state changes? Frequently triggered background process. So I have not tried it with the, so two questions going on. I have not tried it with the Surface Duo SDK and emulator yet, not at all, but there'd be no reason it wouldn't. Like I said, I'm actually planning on, I'm trying to see how I can reuse the work that Forms does for that. So that way Forms and I can share the same exact platform specific layer, just not all of the rest. And if we can get that working, then I'd get anything, any platform they support, I support, and vice versa. So I'd be able to help donate some of my Blazor stuff to them, things like that. So that's kind of cool. And as far as the other one, how do I limit scope for state changes? So state changes, like a tweet updater and with tweets in a list view. So the big thing about that is that shouldn't, that's an interesting one. I haven't looked too close into that. The way this thing works is it depends on where they're set. So like for a tweet view with like likes and things like that. The tweet object itself, everything doesn't get notified about everything. The only thing that will get notified that's why that state value is important, like we were showing in these things. So if you had, or environment, if it's environment or state, I just need to know to pay attention to that object. So if we go back to that list view, or that, this one. So let's go here. So let's say this was something on like play, we had a play count, how many people have played, and this is actually getting data from the web. When this song object is updated, only things that are using that exact object are going to get that notification. So in this case, list view details is going to get it. Now, if list view details is off screen, it's going to get that notification, but it's not going to do anything with it because the native stuff's off screen, and it'll refresh and reapply. It does the diffing thing when the thing comes back on screen. So in that case, it shouldn't be an issue. So if you're updating these objects and in a list view, the only ones that are going to even be on screen and be subscribed are going to be the ones that are on screen anyway. Because when they scroll off screen, their view is actually taken off. Depending on the platform, it's destroyed or not destroyed. And at that point, it's not going to be listening to song anyway, or tweet or whatever. So it should automatically, I mean, you're scoping it by that object. Now, if you're using this like one tweet object all over the freaking place, well, I mean, you did that. You chose to do that. But in a list view, you don't, because like each one gets their own object. So that automatically limits the scope. Now for your root view and like scroll position or where you're at and how many things are in the items and whatnot, as that item source changes, that'll just magically work anyway. And it shouldn't be an issue. Like if you get a notification, hey, we have more tweets or more objects in this list, it should just add them in just fine, because you're at a certain section. The OS takes care of that, like an iOS and Android. So it shouldn't even be an issue there. But yes, because yeah, if you're notifying that this song changed and the song's not even in memory anywhere or not being used, it shouldn't be an issue at all. So should be good. You kind of set the scope by how you use them and where you use them. And as soon as this view is not being used, it is no longer listening to song. And it does that when it comes in, when it's created, it figures out what it has, what it needs to. And now it also listens for the environment changing for song. So if song changes, it now knows to listen to that one instead of the old one, and it unsubscribes and all that, which is really nice. All right. Any other questions? Thirsty. Oh, no, you don't have to say last question. You can ask as many as you want. So what is a good 1.0? So I have a few things that I'm working on to try and get this into a good state. Right now, our layout still needs more work. John actually flew up to Alaska. He's the one who did a lot of the layout, and we worked on it and we got some of it better, but there's still some issues. As you noticed when I reloaded that page, certain things just go away. Layout needs fixed. And particularly with hot reloads, the layout freaks out right now. Some of the layouts freak out. So I need to do some of that. But a good, proper working layout is required for a 1.0. Right now, I have been distracted when I've been working on Comet on doing some of the Skia controls because they're fun and I want to. Are they needed for a 1.0? No. Nice to have? Sure. Great. The Mac and the Visual Studio Code, the VS Code extension work great for iOS, and the VS for Mac one works great for Android. VS Code extension does not work for Android at all, and so therefore it only works on iOS and only works on a Mac. That needs fixed. Just can't ship that way. So I need to have like Android support in VS Code, and I need to spend some time redoing the extension for Hot Reload. There's a couple things I don't like about it with the communication. I need to make it a bit more solid. And also I know I'm doing a couple things wrong on Visual Studio. It was my first Visual Studio extension and I made some mistakes. So I know I'm doing some things on the wrong threads. There's some crashes. I need to fix that. So that needs some hardening. Controls. I think that we need to get a lot of the controls on all the different platforms in sync and in the same exact state, because right now they're not. Clip shape, overlay, only work on iOS. Well, that doesn't work. I mean, that's just not good. So, and there's a lot of controls that just aren't built there yet. So I need to really spend some time on those. And also, I don't have an app model yet. I need to be able to say new Comet app. I have a branch that has that kind of working in it. So you can say like new Comet app and things like that. Yeah, I hope that some people can definitely. I love all the contributions. I think almost all the pull requests are in right now. There's 2 pull requests that have not been accepted. One was trying to fix something, but it broke something else. So I need to figure out how to do that. It's with hot reload on Android and Windows. That part's a little broken still. And the other one's just has a couple formatting changes and just a couple things like that that need updated. One weird inconsistency. It was a date picker. That's what it was. And like it does something weird. So a couple bugs on that to get fixed and we'll get them in. But most pull requests have been merged within a day or so. I think the oldest one is something for trying to fix hot reload on Android. It fixes the crash, but it breaks hot reloading. So I've got to look more into that and help fix that pull request. So, I mean, that would be get some more of these controls in a better state. I also think that with the layout, it needs to be more opinionated. I like having good defaults, but defaults all need to be documented. So I like to have default padding and margin and things like that to where things look good without you doing much. But we need to document what all of those defaults are. This is why we're defaulting and this is what they are. And I think material design does the best job of that. The material.io stuff tells you exactly why it added padding around this object. And that's just what it does. Every one of these will have a 6 padding and they call it out and tell you what it is. So that, and then a crap ton of documentation because there's really not much documentation on this. Those are some of the really big things I'd need. And if we get through a few of those, we can probably get close to a 1.0. That's a lot. It's a whole lot. So anyone who wants to help out, accept pull requests, I will work with you. There's a Discord channel. You can definitely, that's under, trying to remember all my commands. I think social will say the Discord. Yeah, there's a Discord channel. You can jump out, hang out there. I'm in there all the time. I answer questions. I was answering questions just the other night at like 11:30 my time. So, no, I have not created an issues for milestone 1. The project management side on this is pretty bad, which is kind of funny since I'm a PM. But the problem is I wanted to use the GitHub project tracking, but I would like to allow you guys to contribute to that. Well, in order for you to do that, I have to add you to the project. It's crazy for something that's so collaborative with as of GitHub with sending pull requests. You should be able to just like fill things out and then it sends me a thing and I can approve them or disapprove them and whether or not they show up inside those boards. Right? Let's work collaboratively. Not you have to have permission. That's just not the doesn't make sense. So I haven't found a great way to do these. Maybe issues really is the best way. Throw a bunch in there, throw milestone 1 tags. A lot of the issues that are in there go back to that original hackathon that happened. We filled some out and I just have not been good. Some of them have even been fixed. And the other day I went through and started closing some out. Hey, this was fixed months ago. So does the Azure DevOps for open source, I'm using Azure DevOps right now for all my CI. Does that allow people to use it without being added? That's the big thing. You guys should be able to help contribute and make things better without me having to specifically add each of you. Hey, new issue. So yeah, if we can, I'm fine using Azure DevOps and using their Kanban boards or whatever style or flavor we want to use. But the biggest thing is I haven't found a good way to actually manage this in an open source project, aside from just throwing a bunch of GitHub issues on there. But GitHub issues have a lot of things where you can't put them in that board style to where you're like, I'm going to move it here. And these are the ones I'm working on now. It doesn't work great as a good to-do list because it's just so big and overwhelming. It doesn't filter as well. And yes, you can filter by tags, but to me, that's a lot more work. Hold on 1 second. Phone call. Got to answer this. 1 sec.
If I'm not back in 5 minutes, just wait longer.
All right, sorry about that. Real life gets in the way sometimes. So yes, how to manage an open source project. If people have ideas on that, I would love help on that. And like I said, I think I shouldn't be the only one who has to manage of what goes into these things. That's the kind of nice thing about issues, but I think that a Kanban board style thing should also work for that. So I can check into Azure DevOps. That's a good option. But like I said, I need to, yeah, I like the idea of some milestones too. I also want to redo some of the hot reload extensions. I want to re-architect the way it works. Me and re-architecting everything. Right now, iOS and Android work differently. All the platforms work the same except for Android. So I need to do a few things in there and make that a little bit different. Right now, all the hot reloading is happening on device or in the simulator, and it's using Roslyn actually on the device or simulator. Except on Android, it's not using Roslyn because of some issues I ran into. But it is using Roslyn on the iPhone, which is awesome. And I eventually want to move it to where all of that is happening in the IDE, and then it sends those updates over. So it just sends over the new DLLs and things like that, and also the communication between the two. That's something I really, really need to improve. I started on that a week or two ago. So many different parts of this I've started on. So yeah, if anyone wants to help, I would start by looking at helping get Android into a better shape. It's working on the renderers. The render architecture is not too crazy. It's pretty simple. They're called handlers here. That's the big difference. But for most of them, you jump in, you subclass the abstract handler. It just makes it easy for you. So you'd say it's a text field, and on Android, it's an edit text. That's what this thing does. And then you'd say, here's the properties that we're going to support from Comet. So text, and then like the color. That's the text color. Almost everything has .color on it. And then it's super easy. All you do is in these map functions, or here they're saying the text property, make it cast the thing. You'll notice that there's a required method to create that text edit. I thought there was. Oh, create view. You have to override create view because it's abstract, so it forces that. And that's going to return that edit text view. And then from there, all you say is, hey, set that edit native text view. Let's grab its text. Or for the color, get color. And get color has a default color you can pass in. So you can say, hey, here's the default color. And off we go. So I have been focusing. I keep going back and forth on what to focus on. Right now, like I said, I'm looking into a couple different things. My day job is I've got to assign some other things, so I haven't been able to work on Comet full time with it. So I'm distracted for the next week or two. I'm not going to be able to work this closely on it. Skia controls I was doing for fun and actually just working out how the models work on that. So now that a couple controls are done, I'm probably good on Skia controls for a while. They're really fun though. I've been having a lot of fun doing the Skia controls. So sometimes it's easy to get distracted by doing fun things. But the Skia controls even follow that same exact pattern. The difference is they have the properties, and then they also have a draw mapper for this is how we draw the different layers. So everything has layers, and it says, okay, draw the track, draw the progress, draw the thumb. And again, there's the Skia code to draw those individual things. We didn't talk animation at all. The animation framework is really, really, really slick. I'm actually using it inside of even Skia. I can just say like, hey, animate, set environment, toggle progress, and then here's the value. And so I can actually animate how it moves along. And at that point, I'm able to say, hey, when I'm drawing the thumb, get the progress, default of 0, get the progress, and then I just say, hey, where is it along those lines, and draw it. And it's going to animate at 120 frames per second on an iPad, and probably a lot slower on an Android. But it's tied into the native refresh rates. So it'll animate appropriately, and just the animations are just as simple as just like, do this, do that. Let's go to the actual animation sample. But I'm able to just say, hey, animated text dot animate, text dot background, text dot color, text dot font size. And then this thing, animated sample, that thing just goes nuts and starts animating its color. And there's there's a few different things that are animated. It's just not just one. Like here's an animation sequence saying, start, do this color, do this color. And that's how you animate. That's all you have to do. Eventually, we need to add some scale and rotation stuff. I don't have rotation or scale working yet. So yes, it should have better performance for different reasons, not necessarily the XAML, because you can compile XAML, and once you compile XAML, it shouldn't be the perfect there. There's the way it does a few things is better. The views are lighter weight. Right now, the renderers are all the fast render style from Xamarin Forms, but Xamarin Forms on Android has like 3 fast renders. So the renderer architecture is faster. So there's better performance there. But I mean, in the end, yeah, it's C# and C# compiles down fine, but they have a XAML compiler. So for that reason, XAML versus C#, it's negligible. This uses a lot less reflection, a lot less, because doing magic strings is pure reflection, and reflection's slow. So since everything is compiled, when you're saying I'm using this value, I'm using this value. I don't have to do reflection to find those. So that is a lot faster. Just out of the gate, reflection slow. And so minimizing reflection, yes, that makes them faster. So that's a big difference between XAML and C#, making it faster. All right. Any other questions? Probably getting towards the end of a stream for the day. It's been a little while. But I will answer questions if you guys have them. Just in general, it doesn't even necessarily have to be Comet. We can talk Xamarin, Comet, Xamarin Forms. But like I said, I'm trying to also look in how I can bring some of the things I've learned from doing Comet into Xamarin Forms. Hey, Ravedon, thanks for the follow. So we should get some improvements from what I've been doing here into Xamarin Forms anyway. I'm working with that team, and like I said, I'm looking how to reuse their renderers, and then of course we'll get to make them faster because I need fast renderers. So having slow renders just isn't an option because I want it to be smooth and quick, like those animations you see right there. All right. If there are no more questions, I will probably end. Before we go though, let's find someone to raid. It's always good to pass people off and find someone who's doing something cool. Let me go look at this. But yeah, I unfortunately am a one-man army right now on this. I'd love some help. If anyone wants to contribute, ask questions. I have no problem holding your hand through doing some pull requests or getting you guys up and going. It's not an issue at all for me to help you or help get you guys up and going. So let me see who I know, if there's any. Do you guys have any recommendations of anyone who's building something cool right now? Coding, trying to see. Tim's working on a racing game. Maybe we'll go check any of the other live coders or any of the. I'm on a coding team, which is awesome because I can hopefully find. Just finding someone to raid is the hardest part about this. So maybe we'll just go. Who's on? There's coding stream. Who is coding? Only a few people. Let's go check out. Tim's building a game right now, and Tim is crazy and building his entire game without an engine. He's building it all in C++ himself, which I'm amazed. That's just beyond me. I like building video games, but I only do them in like Unity or Unreal. I used to help work on Mono Game, but yeah, not doing that anymore. So thanks guys. I'm going to keep working on Comet. Like I said, I'm distracted with some other things for work for the next week or two. But I'm going to re-architect and make Comet even simpler, the project structure. And I'm going to work on doing some other things to make it even nicer. And if you want to help, I'm in the process of looking how we can import the Xamarin Forms renders into a nice reusable thing so I can use them and Forms can use them. And if we can get that working, this will be a lot easier. I can work on just the framework side, not necessarily renderers, and I can focus more on tooling and things like that, which is really, really, really exciting. So thanks, guys. I'll be doing more streams on this. Feel free to jump in. Even if I'm working on Comet itself, ask these questions. Ask why I'm doing what I'm doing. Help shape this API. This is a chance to work on something new and really steer it. I love it when you guys help out and give me opinions and help me to design these APIs. So that way they're nice, clean, and fun to use. All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you guys later. Bye.